My friend, the smartest way to deal with toxic people always begins with recognizing their presence, because you cannot protect yourself from something you fail to identify. Toxic people rarely come labeled as such. They often come as friends, coworkers, even family members who at first may seem to care, but over time you begin to see a pattern in their behavior that slowly drains your energy and weakens your spirit. The Bible tells us that by their fruits we shall know them, meaning that what a person consistently produces in your life will reveal who they truly are. If every time you interact with someone, you walk away feeling smaller, discouraged, confused, or emotionally drained, chances are you are dealing with someone toxic. It's not about one bad day or one disagreement, but about a pattern of behavior that over time begins to pull you down rather than build you up. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward handling them wisely. Toxic people operate in different ways. Some use constant criticism disguised as concern, pointing out flaws while never acknowledging progress. Others manipulate with guilt, making you feel as though you owe them something, twisting every situation to serve their narrative. Some thrive on drama, constantly stirring conflict, gossip, and arguments to keep attention on themselves. Others use passive aggression, pretending to agree with you outwardly, but undermining you behind the scenes. They are skilled at wearing masks, appearing helpful, loving, or trustworthy in public, while in private they create division and plant seeds of doubt. If you are not paying attention, you can easily confuse their words with genuine care. That is why discernment is crucial. Discernment allows you to separate words from actions, intentions from appearances. It is easy to be deceived by smooth speech or a charming personality, but what matters is the consistent effect that person has on your spirit. Do they inspire growth, faith, and confidence, or do they leave you feeling trapped, anxious, and insecure? Toxic people are often like poison that doesn't kill instantly but weakens gradually. At first, you may not even notice the toll it is taking, but over weeks, months, or years, the drain becomes clear. Recognizing them means training yourself to pay attention not just to what people say, but to how you feel after being with them. Sometimes the hardest part of recognizing toxic people is admitting the truth when they are close to you. It could be a family member who constantly belittles you, a friend who secretly envies your success, or even a spiritual leader who manipulates your faith for control. These relationships are harder to acknowledge because they carry deep emotional ties. Yet, denial keeps you bound, while recognition begins the process of freedom. God does not call us to remain blind to harmful influences. Instead, He tells us to guard our hearts above all else, because everything we do flows from it. Guarding your heart begins with identifying who is trying to pollute it. Another sign of toxicity is how these individuals handle your boundaries. A healthy person respects limits, even when they don't agree with them, but a toxic person constantly pushes past them, making you feel guilty for standing firm. If someone consistently dismisses your feelings, invalidates your concerns, or makes you feel selfish for protecting yourself, that is not love or friendship, it is control. Recognizing this behavior requires courage, because it forces you to see the truth rather than the illusion you may want to believe. Recognition also involves self-awareness. Sometimes we attract toxic people because we are not fully healed ourselves, or because we confuse loyalty with bondage. Toxic people often sense who will tolerate their behavior, and they exploit that kindness or insecurity. By becoming more aware of your worth in God, you begin to see clearly who is pulling you away from that truth. Recognition is not about labeling people as enemies, but about understanding what role they play in your life and whether that role aligns with God's purpose for you. When you truly recognize a toxic person, you stop expecting them to give what they cannot give. You stop waiting for them to change into someone they are not willing to become. You stop giving them endless chances to harm you, thinking it will be different next time. Recognition frees you from false hope and positions you for wise action. It is the first and most essential step in the journey of dealing with toxic people. Because until you see clearly, you cannot respond wisely. Once recognition has taken place, The next step in dealing with toxic people is setting firm and healthy boundaries. Toxic individuals thrive where there are no limits, where they can manipulate, overstep, and drain without resistance. They test the waters, seeing how much they can take before you push back, and if they find no resistance, they settle into a pattern of control. Boundaries are not about shutting people out of your life completely, but about creating protective lines that preserve your peace, your faith, and your mental and emotional well-being. Without boundaries, toxic people take until there is nothing left. With boundaries, you reclaim authority over your own life and refuse to allow someone else's dysfunction to dictate your peace. Establishing boundaries requires clarity. You must first know what is acceptable to you and what is not. If someone constantly criticizes your dreams, interrupts your growth, or mocks your faith, the boundary might be as simple as limiting how much of that conversation you allow. If someone manipulates you with guilt or uses your kindness against you, the boundary might be choosing not to respond immediately or not engaging in arguments that spiral into unnecessary conflict. Boundaries are essentially you saying, "This is where I end and you begin. This is what I will allow and this is what I will not." It is an act of self-respect and, more importantly, an act of obedience to God who calls us to steward our hearts and lives wisely. Toxic people rarely respect boundaries willingly, so expect resistance. When you first establish limits, they may push harder, testing if you truly mean what you say. They might call you selfish, accuse you of being unloving, or attempt to trip you back into old patterns. This is the moment where many people cave in because the pressure feels uncomfortable. But standing firm is key. The discomfort of enforcing boundaries is temporary, but the peace that comes from them is lasting. When you refuse to be manipulated, the toxic person realizes their tactics no longer have power over you. That shift can either push them to adjust their behavior or reveal their true unwillingness to respect you. Boundaries also teach you balance between compassion and wisdom. Scripture calls us to love others, but love does not mean tolerating abuse or dysfunction. Jesus himself often withdrew from crowds, set apart time for rest, and refused to engage with people who tried to manipulate his mission. Love without wisdom becomes enabling, and wisdom without love becomes harsh. Boundaries are where love and wisdom meet. They allow you to extend grace without sacrificing your own God-given peace. It's saying, "I love you, but I will not let you destroy me. I forgive you, but I will not give you unlimited access to my spirit." Another vital part of boundaries is consistency. It is not enough to draw a line once. You must uphold it consistently. Toxic individuals are skilled at waiting until your guard drops and slipping back into old patterns. If your words and actions don't align, they quickly learn that your boundaries are flexible. Consistency communicates seriousness. It shows that you value yourself enough to protect your life from unnecessary negativity. Over time, consistent boundaries create a natural barrier that either forces the toxic person to change how they interact with you or pushes them to distance themselves entirely. Either outcome protects you. Boundaries can take different forms depending on the relationship. With coworkers, it might be keeping interactions strictly professional and not engaging in gossip. With family, it could mean limiting time spent together or redirecting conversations when they turn harmful. With friends, it might be refusing to invest energy into one-sided relationships. Sometimes, the boundary may be as extreme as cutting off contact entirely when a person refuses to respect your limits despite multiple chances. Each boundary is tailored to the situation, but the purpose remains the same: safeguarding your spiritual, emotional, and mental health. Establishing boundaries also requires inner strength that comes from knowing your identity in God. If you are unsure of your worth, boundaries feel selfish or unkind. But when you recognize that you are God's creation, designed for purpose and peace, you understand that protecting yourself is not selfish, it is stewardship. God never called you to be a dumping ground for someone else's toxicity. He called you to be a light, and light cannot shine if it is constantly covered by negativity and manipulation. Boundaries allow that light to remain bright and undimmed. The beauty of boundaries is that they not only protect you, but they also teach others how to treat you. People learn from your actions what you will accept and what you will not. Every time you stand firm, you reinforce your value and train others to respect it. And while toxic individuals may resist, healthy ones will honor it, and that difference will clarify which relationships are worth keeping and which ones are worth letting go. Boundaries are the divine walls that guard your heart, your peace, and your destiny, ensuring that the plans God has for you are not sabotaged by the dysfunction of others. Once boundaries are established, the next critical step in dealing with toxic people is mastering the art of emotional detachment. Toxic individuals often thrive on reactions. They seek to provoke, manipulate, or control through emotional outbursts, guilt, intimidation, or drama. Every time you respond with anger, fear, or defensiveness, you give them the fuel they need to keep their influence alive. Emotional detachment is not about being cold, heartless, or uncaring. It is about taking control of your responses and refusing to allow someone else's chaos to dictate your peace. When you detach emotionally, you take back the power they once had over you, and you anchor yourself in strength, self-control, and God's guidance. Detachment begins with awareness. You must recognize the triggers toxic people use against you and prepare yourself in advance not to respond impulsively. Some toxic individuals use criticism to make you feel small, while others use anger to dominate or guilt to manipulate. When you recognize these tactics for what they are, you begin to see through the illusion of control. Instead of reacting automatically, you pause, breathe, and remind yourself that you are not responsible for managing their emotions. You only control your own. This shift in perspective removes the toxic person's ability to use your emotions as a weapon against you. The foundation of emotional detachment is rooted in self-control, which is a fruit of the Spirit. Scripture calls believers to be slow to anger, quick to listen, and steadfast in peace. Toxic people often feed on impulsive responses, but when you choose silence over shouting, calm over chaos, you rob them of their leverage. This is not weakness. It is strength. It takes far more power to hold your peace than to explode in frustration. Emotional detachment means refusing to fight battles that are not worth your energy and focusing instead on protecting your spirit. Detachment also involves reframing how you interpret toxic behavior. Instead of taking every word or action personally, you begin to see their toxicity as a reflection of them, not you. A toxic person's criticism often reveals their insecurity. Their manipulation often exposes their desperation for control. Their anger usually masks their own unresolved pain. When you detach, you stop internalizing their negativity and recognize it as their burden, not yours. This mental shift frees you from unnecessary guilt, shame, or self-blame and allows you to move forward unshaken. A powerful tool in emotional detachment is practicing neutrality. Instead of arguing back, you use calm and simple responses that neither fuel nor escalate the conflict. Phrases like "I understand," "That's your perspective," or silence itself can be powerful shields. Toxic people thrive on drama, but when there is no reaction, no emotional energy to feed on, they quickly grow frustrated. By remaining neutral, you deny them the satisfaction of control, and over time, they may even lose interest in attempting to manipulate you. Detachment also requires prioritizing inner peace over winning arguments. Toxic people often twist words, change narratives, or shift blame. Engaging in endless debates only drains you further and rarely brings resolution. When you detach, you accept that not every battle deserves your attention. Instead of wasting hours trying to prove your point, you protect your peace by stepping back. Walking away is not surrender, it is wisdom. It shows you value your mental and spiritual health more than the illusion of victory in a pointless fight. Another aspect of detachment is creating emotional distance, even if physical distance is not always possible. You may still have to interact with toxic coworkers, family members, or acquaintances, but emotional detachment allows you to be present without being consumed. You interact respectfully, keep conversations surface level if needed, and avoid being drawn into unnecessary conflict. Emotional distance is like an invisible shield. It allows you to function in the same space while keeping your inner world intact and untouched. Prayer and spiritual grounding are also vital in practicing detachment. Toxic encounters can leave you drained if you try to handle them solely with willpower. But when you anchor yourself in God's presence, you carry His peace into every interaction. Prayer before engaging with a toxic person sets your mind and heart in alignment with God's wisdom. Scripture reminds us that peace is not something the world gives, but something God places within us. Emotional detachment, then, is not only a mental discipline, but also a spiritual shield, where you invite God to guard your heart and mind. Finally, emotional detachment empowers you to make decisions based on wisdom rather than emotional pressure. Toxic people often create urgency, drama, or guilt to push you into choices that serve them. When you are detached, you slow down, evaluate, and respond with clarity rather than impulse. You no longer allow fear or manipulation to dictate your path. Instead, you operate from strength, grounded in self-control and divine guidance. Over time, this not only diminishes the toxic person's power, but also strengthens your ability to live freely without being chained to the emotional chaos of others. Another essential strategy in dealing with toxic people is understanding the power of selective communication. Toxic individuals thrive on drawing others into arguments, conflicts, and drama because these interactions give them control, attention, and energy. The more you engage with their negativity, the deeper you become entangled in their web of dysfunction. Selective communication is about being intentional with your words, measured in your responses, and wise in your engagement. It is the ability to communicate in a way that does not give the toxic person ammunition while still maintaining your dignity and authority. This skill requires discernment, patience, and a commitment to peace over chaos. Selective communication begins with recognizing that not every comment deserves a response. Toxic people often bait others with provocative statements designed to spark conflict or elicit an emotional reaction. Instead of rushing to defend yourself or explain, sometimes the wisest response is silence. Silence can be more powerful than words because it denies the toxic person the reaction they are fishing for. By not engaging, you refuse to enter their cycle of manipulation, and in doing so, you protect your own peace. When words are necessary, brevity is key. Long explanations, justifications, or arguments often give toxic individuals more material to twist or use against you. Instead, short, calm, and factual statements are far more effective. Responses such as, "I disagree," "That's your opinion," or "I'll think about it," provide closure without opening the door to further conflict. Selective communication means you choose your words carefully, never oversharing, never explaining more than needed, and never feeding their appetite for drama. Another critical aspect of selective communication is emotional neutrality in tone. Toxic people are experts at reading emotions and exploiting them. If your voice carries frustration, sadness, or defensiveness, they will use it as leverage. Speaking calmly, firmly, and with composure creates a protective shield. Even if their words sting, your response should not betray emotional vulnerability. Neutrality sends a clear message. You are not a source of fuel for their toxicity. This calmness also reinforces your authority because true strength is displayed through composure, not aggression. Selective communication also requires discernment about what topics to avoid. Toxic people often push conversations into sensitive areas where they can provoke or manipulate. They may bring up your past mistakes, criticize your values, or question your decisions. You are under no obligation to engage in these traps. Steering the conversation back to neutral ground, refusing to discuss certain matters, or redirecting with a simple statement like, "That's not something I want to discuss," can shut down their attempts to invade your personal boundaries. The less access they have to your vulnerabilities, the weaker their grip becomes. Technology adds another layer to selective communication. Toxic individuals may flood your phone with texts, calls, or social media messages to demand your attention or wear you down. Practicing discipline in when and how you respond is crucial. You are not obligated to reply immediately or at all. Setting clear limits on digital communication, Muting notifications or even blocking if necessary keeps you from being trapped in their cycle of control. Selective communication is as much about when you choose not to engage as it is about how you engage. Selective communication also draws strength from aligning with truth. Toxic people often use lies, exaggerations, or twisted narratives to manipulate. Standing firm in truth, without being dragged into endless debates, protects you from confusion. Instead of trying to convince them of reality, which often proves futile, you hold fast to what you know is right and choose not to be swayed by their distortions. Truth does not need defending against those committed to deception. It only needs to be lived out. A vital spiritual dimension of selective communication is prayerful discernment before speaking. Scripture teaches that the tongue holds the power of life and death, and every word has weight. Asking God for wisdom before responding ensures your words bring clarity, not confusion, and strength, not weakness. Sometimes the Spirit will lead you to speak firmly, other times to remain silent. Either way, selective communication becomes not only a strategy, but also a spiritual practice of aligning your words with divine wisdom. Selective communication also protects your emotional health by minimizing unnecessary exposure. The less you say, the less toxic individuals can use against you. The fewer details you share, the less room they have to twist your reality. By keeping communication simple, minimal, and intentional, you reduce opportunities for manipulation while maintaining respect. This is not about being rude. It is about being wise. Ultimately, selective communication empowers you to remain in control of your interactions without surrendering to toxicity. It ensures that every word you speak is purposeful and every silence is strategic. Toxic people lose their power when they realize their attempts to provoke, manipulate, or dominate will no longer succeed. Instead of being drawn into their games, you rise above with wisdom, strength, and clarity. Selective communication shifts the balance of power away from them and restores it to you, allowing you to engage from a place of strength rather than weakness. Another powerful strategy in dealing with toxic people is the practice of emotional detachment. Toxic individuals thrive when they know they can provoke an emotional reaction. They manipulate, criticize, and create drama to pull you into a cycle where they control your feelings and dictate your mood. Emotional detachment is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. Rather, it is the ability to separate your inner peace from their chaos. It allows you to remain steady, composed, and unaffected even when they attempt to stir turmoil. The essence of emotional detachment is realizing that you cannot control their behavior, but you can always control your response. Emotional detachment begins with awareness. Recognizing the patterns of manipulation is the first step in disarming them. Toxic people often use predictable tactics: guilt trips, passive aggression insults, or playing the victim. When you see these patterns for what they are, they lose their power to shock or destabilize you. Instead of reacting impulsively, you pause, observe, and remind yourself that their behavior reflects their inner struggles, not your worth. Awareness breaks the automatic cycle of reaction and puts you in control of your emotions. Once awareness is established, the next step is reframing how you perceive their words and actions. Detachment is built when you stop personalizing their toxicity. Hurtful comments, manipulative behavior, or constant negativity are not really about you. They are projections of their unresolved pain, insecurity, or bitterness. By choosing not to absorb their attacks as truth, you create a shield around your heart and mind. This reframing shifts the focus from, "Why are they doing this to me?" to, "This is a reflection of who they are, not who I am." That perspective gives you freedom from their grip. Emotional detachment also requires a deep sense of self-worth. Toxic people often exploit insecurities, knowing that if they can touch the places where you feel inadequate, they can control you. Building strong self-confidence through affirmations, faith, and self-awareness ensures that their criticisms or manipulations cannot penetrate. When you are rooted in your identity and value, no external negativity can define you. Detachment is not indifference. It is standing firm in who you are regardless of what is hurled at you. Practical techniques for detachment include mastering your body language and tone. Toxic people pay close attention to physical cues, waiting for signs of frustration, anger, or hurt. Neutral body language, calm posture, steady eye contact, and relaxed facial expressions denies them satisfaction. A calm tone of voice, even when they are raising theirs, signals that you are in control. This subtle form of detachment communicates strength without aggression, creating a psychological boundary they cannot easily penetrate. Another aspect of detachment is choosing when and how to engage emotionally. Not every situation demands your energy. Sometimes the wisest response is walking away, changing the subject, or refusing to invest time in conversations that only spiral into conflict. Detachment gives you the freedom to decide which battles are worth fighting and which are simply distractions. By conserving your emotional energy for meaningful relationships and purposes, you refuse to let toxic people drain what is sacred. Detachment also involves practicing forgiveness, not as a way of excusing toxic behavior, but as a release of the burden they try to place on you. Holding on to resentment keeps you emotionally tied to their negativity, while forgiveness allows you to let go and move forward. Forgiveness in this context is not reconciliation. It is detachment from the power of their actions to continue hurting you. It is choosing to prioritize your peace over the desire for revenge or validation. Spiritual grounding plays a central role in strengthening emotional detachment. When you anchor your heart in God's truth, toxic words lose their sting. Prayer, meditation, and reflection provide constant reminders that your value comes from a higher source, not the opinions of broken people. Detachment becomes easier when you shift focus from human approval to divine affirmation. Toxic individuals lose their power when they realize you are not dependent on their validation for your sense of worth. A crucial practice in detachment is cultivating inner peace through daily habits. Toxicity can only thrive in a restless mind, but a calm, centered spirit is untouchable. Practices such as journaling, deep breathing, and gratitude strengthen your emotional resilience. By consistently nurturing peace within, you make yourself less vulnerable to external chaos. This inner discipline ensures that even in the presence of toxic individuals, you remain grounded. Ultimately, emotional detachment is about reclaiming authority over your inner world. Toxic people may try to control circumstances, manipulate outcomes, or attack your character, but they cannot touch the sanctuary of your peace unless you allow them. Detachment is the invisible boundary that protects your soul from their storm. It allows you to interact without being consumed, respond without being provoked, and exist in their presence without losing yourself. When you master emotional detachment, toxic people lose their greatest weapon, the ability to control your emotions. The final and smartest way to deal with toxic people lies in mastering the art of reclaiming your power through boundaries that are both practical and spiritual. Toxic individuals feed on control, and they thrive when they sense you are bending to their patterns of manipulation or fear. The antidote is firm boundaries that protect your time, your energy, and your soul. Boundaries are not about punishment or retaliation. They are about drawing a clear line that defines what you will and will not allow in your life. By setting limits, you reclaim your sense of authority and refuse to hand over control to someone who is determined to create chaos. The first step in reclaiming this power is clarity. You must know who you are and what you value. Toxic people often blur lines by making you question your decisions, your worth, or your perceptions. They thrive in confusion, using it to erode your confidence. By taking time to define your non-negotiables, your principles, your standards, and your goals, you build a mental fortress that cannot be easily dismantled. Clarity becomes the foundation of your boundaries because when you know what matters, you cannot be swayed by someone else's drama or demands. Boundaries must also be communicated with confidence. Toxic people often test limits, pushing to see if you will compromise. If your boundary is vague or inconsistent, they will exploit it. This is why it is vital to speak with firmness, not aggression. Saying no, refusing certain behaviors, or walking away from toxic conversations is not rudeness, it is strength. The ability to communicate a limit calmly and without apology sends a message that you value your peace above their approval. This shift takes away their power because they can no longer manipulate you with guilt or pressure. Another aspect of reclaiming power is understanding that boundaries are not always external. They are also internal. Internal boundaries involve mastering your thoughts and emotions so you do not internalize the poison of toxic behavior. You cannot control what someone says, but you can control what you choose to absorb. By training your mind to reject lies, criticism, or negativity, you build resilience that shields you from their attacks. Internal boundaries mean you can be in the presence of toxicity without allowing it to infiltrate your identity. It is the invisible armor that protects your spirit. Detachment from control is equally important. Toxic people want to dominate your decisions, relationships, and even your faith. They may use fear, intimidation, or manipulation to box you into choices that benefit them. Reclaiming power means refusing to let them dictate the direction of your life. This requires courage to take back control of your time, to say no to unnecessary obligations, and to invest energy only where it aligns with your purpose. Every time you prioritize your peace and growth over their demands, you weaken their hold over you. Forgiveness is also part of reclaiming power. While it may seem counterintuitive, forgiveness is not about excusing the harm, but about freeing yourself from the chains of bitterness. When you refuse to forgive, you remain tied to the toxic person emotionally, still carrying the weight of their actions. Forgiveness cuts that tie, allowing you to move forward unburdened. It denies them the ability to continue influencing your heart long after the moment has passed. Forgiveness, in this sense, is a form of ultimate boundary. It says, "You cannot control me by the pain you caused." Reclaiming power also requires a shift in perspective. Toxic people often appear larger than life because we focus on their negativity. But when you redirect your attention toward your growth, your purpose, and your blessings, their influence begins to shrink. Gratitude is a powerful weapon against toxicity because it fills your spirit with light that darkness cannot overcome. When you train your mind to see the good, you resist being consumed by the negativity projected at you. Spiritual strength is perhaps the most powerful boundary of all. Anchoring yourself in faith gives you access to divine wisdom and strength that toxic individuals cannot penetrate. When you walk in alignment with God's truth, you recognize that no human voice has the authority to define your worth or destiny. This spiritual grounding provides the confidence to stand firm against manipulation and the peace to remain steady even when attacked. Faith turns boundaries from mere human effort into a divine shield, protecting you at the deepest level of your being. Finally, reclaiming power means taking responsibility for your healing and growth. Toxic people may have wounded you, but they cannot define your future unless you allow them. By investing in self-care, nurturing healthy relationships, and pursuing your calling, you rise above their influence. The smartest way to deal with toxic people is not to defeat them, but to outgrow them. To become so secure, so grounded, and so filled with purpose that their negativity cannot diminish your light. Boundaries, clarity, forgiveness, gratitude, and spiritual strength are the tools that ensure you remain in control of your life, no matter what toxicity surrounds you.